Amazing Maid's touch exposed hidden threat. Billionaire warned not to leave as driver revealed with. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine as she lingered outside the grand living room, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses echoing just beyond the ornate doors. The Harrington family's opulence both dazzled and overwhelmed her, as did the weight of her life confined to the shadows of their glittering world. Every day she devoted herself to dusting crystal chandeliers and polishing marble countertops, yet in those spaces of luxury, her own aspirations seemed to evaporate like steam from a hot kettle. Working as a maid, Sarah felt invisible. The Harringtons barely acknowledged her unless she was retrieving their forgotten possessions. As the gathering grew raucous, she dusted one of the family's antique shelves, her mind racing with the responsibilities that awaited her back home. Her mother's health was worsening, and Sarah had stopped dreaming about being a social worker and focused on the everyday grind just to make ends meet. But as she picked up a decorative frame, an unsettling whisper from the corner of the room shot through her focus. It was David, the billionaire head of the household, and his driver, a towering figure whose cold demeanor sent a wave of unease over Sarah. "Make sure they don't leave the estate tonight," the driver urged, his voice low and menacing. "The situation is worse than I thought. We can't expose them." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as dread pooled in her stomach. A threat? The idea of violence against the girls she had watched over, laughed with, and taught to be kind gnawed at her insides. She felt a surge of anger bloom deep within, an instinct to protect them battling her anxiety. Should she confront David and risk losing her job, the income that supported her mother's care? The once comfortable rhythm of her life was rapidly turning chaotic, and each moment spent in indecision electrified the air around her. That night, as she sat at her cramped kitchen table with textbooks spread around her, symbols of her dedication and dreams, tension gripped her thoughts. Should she remain loyal to the Harringtons or expose the threat looming over their lives? Her hands trembled, fingers tracing the words in her social workbooks without absorbing their meaning. She was torn. The generosity of the Harringtons had provided her a paycheck, but had also shackled her with a feeling of inferiority. The voices of her friends, struggles and aspirations swirling, echoed in their memory. They were all working hard in their own ways. Would they despise her for informing the Harringtons of foreshadowed danger? And if she didn't act, could she live with the consequences if harm came to the girls? Each conflicting thought twisted within her mind, intensifying her struggle. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening.
YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The haunting conversation replayed like a mantra in her mind as she stood at the threshold of the Harringtons' luxurious living room. Each tick of the clock on the marble mantelpiece felt like a countdown, ushering her toward an unthinkable crossroads. The fear of confronting her employer twisted into a tightening knot in her stomach. She felt small and insignificant, yet the lives of the girls she loved hung in the balance. Sarah's heart raced as she prepared to step forward and confront both David and her fate. Just then, her mother's voice echoed in her thoughts. Focus on your studies and your career. Was this her chance to protect them all, or would she be seen as just a maid, unworthy of concern? A sudden chill swept through her, leaving her frozen at the edge of that grand room, life and loyalty pulling her in conflicting directions. The tremor in Sarah's hands became a tangible reminder of the choice ahead. Drowning in her swirling emotions, she felt the weight of the Harringtons' world press down on her thin shoulders, but beneath that pressure blossomed a fierce determination, ignited by the whispered threat she'd overheard. This was not merely a matter of her employment anymore, it was a question of integrity and responsibility. She could not stand by while danger loomed over the innocent. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the center of the ostentatious room, her heart thudding in her ears. The laughter reduced to a dull murmur as the opulent parties centered around them faded into the background. She felt their eyes fall on her, curiosity mixed with condescension. This was her moment. She had to confront David, to voice her concern despite the fear clawing at her resolve. "Mr. Harrington," she began, her voice wavering but growing stronger with each word. "Can you spare a moment?" David, surprised by her interruption, paused mid-conversation. "Sarah, is everything all right?" His tone dripped with skeptical disbelief, the way one might address a pet. "It's about the girls," she pressed on, her anxiety met with an instinctive surge of urgency. I overheard something concerning, a threat about not leaving the estate. It's serious. His expression shifted slightly, the careless mask slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal a flicker of concern. He motioned for her to step aside, away from prying ears. What do you mean? Your driver, she continued, heart racing. He mentioned something that felt heavy. I can't ignore it. They need to be protected.
I care for them, and if... Stop, he cut her off abruptly, his eyes narrowing. You're saying you heard a threat against my family? You must realize how grave this accusation is. Sarah felt a wave of embarrassment choke her for a moment, but pressed forward. I understand, but you have to trust me. They're in danger, and I can help. David studied her, a storm of emotions playing across his face. The splendor around them felt starkly incongruous against the looming dread she sensed. Would he dismiss her? Would he even listen? This was the first time she had pushed against the boundaries of her role, the boundaries that had kept her voice hushed and her dreams unfulfilled. What do you intend to do about this, Sarah? He asked, the sharp edge of professionalism mixing with a hint of genuine worry. I want to help, she replied, a tentative conviction blossoming within her. I know there's something wrong with the driver. I have a plan. Plan? David raised an eyebrow, skepticism returning, but softened by an undercurrent of respect. I could watch him, observe his behavior when he's near the girls. Figuring out his patterns might help. A beat of silence followed as he processed her words. It was a bold proposal, and one that could either lead to her redemption or undo everything she had worked for. But now that she had dared to speak up, she realized that laying her emotions bare was essential for her own growth. After what felt like an eternity, David considered her. If I agree, you must promise me you'll do it discreetly. If this gets out, it could ruin everything, not just for me, but for you as well. The stakes were painfully clear. I promise, I just want to protect them. The gravity of her commitment settled in, excitement mingling with fear. The reality of her ambition started surging back to life, and she felt empowered for the first time in years. Even if it was fraught with uncertainty, her path shifted into a direction that felt foreboding yet thrilling. Then we'll keep this between us for now, David finally said, a hint of admiration in his tone. But be careful, Sarah. This is dangerous territory. As she stepped away, ready to dive into her newfound mission, victory surged through her veins. She was no longer merely a maid. She was a protector, a tactical observer in a world where her voice mattered. With each decision came the weight of the unknown. But one burning question remained. What if uncovering the truth put her own life at risk? As Sarah retreated to her quarters, the reality loomed larger than ever and enveloped her with uncertainty. She was on the brink of a critical chapter in her life, one filled with revelations and unforeseen dangers. But for now, she needed a plan. Her heart raced as an echo of doubt whispered at the edge of her thoughts. Would she be brave enough to follow through? The moment of resolution had arrived, and the stakes had never felt higher.
The dim light of her quarters flickered as Sarah paced restlessly, her mind a cacophony of worries and adrenaline-fueled determination. The weight of her new role pressed heavily upon her. This was not just a matter of sneaking glances or quietly observing. She had to be astute, calculating, and above all, discreet. Her understanding of the Harrington household had always felt limited to menial tasks, but now, with each step she took, she felt the contours of power shaping around her. She had always envisioned herself as an inconspicuous part of the household, yet now she was poised to become the linchpin in a potentially dangerous situation. The driver's casual demeanor had clouded a menacing undercurrent, one she had to unravel without raising suspicion. It was unsettling to recognize her own agency so vividly, but terrifying to imagine the consequences of failing to protect the very lives she cared about. As she stopped to look at her reflection in the small tarnished mirror, Sarah hardly recognized the woman staring back. The trepidation in her heart matched the fierce flint in her determined eyes. This was an endeavor that would test her limits, not just of courage, but also of ingenuity. She needed to cultivate her observational skills, to hone them sharply enough to pick up on subtle cues that most would overlook. What facial expressions held secrets? What tone of voice concealed lies? She gathered herself, aware that this emotional whirlwind could not be her compass. Calmness was essential. She needed clarity. Resolving to take careful notes in her mind each time she was near the children and the driver, Sarah began to formulate her approach. Perhaps she could initiate casual conversations, provoke reactions that would provide insight. Leaning into her role as a caretaker, she could sidle close to danger without revealing her hand. This realization triggered remnants of her past ambitions, the aspirations she'd buried under layers of doubt and circumstance. What had once seemed distant could now be realized. The drive to protect those entrusted to her care awakened her dormant skills.
The very act of confronting David had catalyzed something within her. No longer trapped by the mere weight of her job, she recognized seeds of resourcefulness awaiting her call. Determining the movements of the driver would be her first task. She mentally plotted when and where opportunities would arise. Any errand that required her presence near him now served a dual purpose. The thought invigorated her. Sarah wasn't just an observer anymore. She was becoming an active participant in a larger narrative, one that could very well alter her future. Yet uncertainty lingered, gnawing at her resolve. Could she actually carry off this charade without exposing her deeper intentions? What if she was wrong, and there was no real threat?
The idea unnerved her, setting her pulse racing, but she would rather err on the side of caution than allow inaction to lead to regret. Her loyalty to the girls was unyielding. The night crept onward as she drafted a loose plan in her notebook, calibrating each move to remain under the radar. Her heart surged with expectation. This endeavor had to be executed flawlessly. Even the slightest misstep could unravel everything. However, a layer of nervous anticipation burned within her. What if her pursuits led her to truths she wasn't prepared for? As she imagined the breadth of what she might uncover, her breath quickened. She recognized that she was delving into a world of shadows, and the mere thought of what lay ahead filled her with a reckless blend of fear and exhilaration. What if the driver was not just a pawn in this game, but the mastermind of something far greater? With this daunting thought echoing in her mind, she realized that she was stepping into a danger far beyond her understanding, one that could potentially cost her more than she'd anticipated. Tomorrow would not only bring new challenges, it would bring revelations that could shatter the fragile reality she longed to protect. As she lay down to rest, another question intruded. Was she truly ready to confront whatever darkness awaited her? With that question hanging heavy in the air, sleep eluded her. She needed to be ready, both mentally and strategically. The real challenge was looming closer than she thought. The next morning greeted Sarah with a sharp light that seeped through her curtains, amplifying the weight of the moment. Her mind raced with fragments of a plan, half-formed ideas that needed precision and execution. As the sun climbed higher, she reviewed her commitments for the day, mentally crossing off each task that could be traversed with purpose. She started in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the girls, the usual morning routine providing a thin veil of normalcy. Their cheerful chatter served as a reminder of why she had taken on this covert assignment. Her heart swelled with affection as they rushed around the table, evidence that the environment she wished to protect was thriving, at least for now. Each giggle and innocent question carved into her determination. Keeping them safe was no longer just a task, it was her mission. After breakfast, she was met with an unexpected invitation from Mrs. Harrington to accompany her on a shopping trip. The opportunity felt like serendipity, a chance to get a clearer view of the world she'd recently entered. As they navigated through bustling streets, nestled between boutiques and cafes, she positioned herself to observe not only Mrs. Harrington's interactions, but also the atmosphere around them. During a brief stop to assess a shop window, she spotted the driver leaning casually against their vehicle.
His posture appeared relaxed, but Sarah noted the slight tension in his shoulders as he scanned the area, eyes sharp and alert. A frisson of unease pricked her skin. He wasn't merely waiting, he was watching. She quelled an instinctual urge to retreat, forcing herself to maintain her friendly composure. Every detail mattered now. The conversation drifted as Mrs. Harrington shared stories of her past, which Sarah listened to attentively, but every so often her gaze would flicker to the driver. How much did he know about the family? What were his true intentions? She felt a growing urgency, a need to extract information while keeping up the charade of loyalty and servitude. As they entered a cafe, Sarah seized a moment of distraction, sliding to the restroom to gather her thoughts. Here, in the tiled quiet, she reflected on the layers she'd begun to uncover. She reminded herself that her ability to nestle within the mundanity of her role was both a shield and a weapon. Each interaction could yield insight. Every innocent remark might smuggle in a clue about the driver's real purposes. Back at the table, when Mrs. Harrington chatted with the barista, Sarah chose her words carefully, using an unassuming tone, a compatibility disguised under hospitality. "I've noticed how much the driver keeps to himself," she ventured, studying Mrs. Harrington's face for any flickers of concern. "Oh, Edward?" Mrs. Harrington waved it off with a chuckle. "He's just a quiet one, but he's reliable. You'll like him once you get to know him." Sarah glanced out of the window at Edward's demeanor again.
still watching with an intensity that prickled at Sarah's instincts. A reliable front. Was that a mask, or was she simply allowing paranoia to paint him as a villain? With each moment, the dichotomy in her thoughts spiraled. The job of an observer was not just to gather data, but to question the foundation upon which those observations were based. She needed to shift her mindset. Understanding motivations required an openness to possibility, an ability to connect patterns that might not yet be clear. As they returned home, Sarah felt the tension coil in her stomach. She had gathered no concrete revelations, just a haunting whisper of foreboding urgency. Was Edward truly harmless, or was he the key to unraveling something much larger and darker? She had decided to approach him, but how could she proceed without triggering his suspicion? The flickering shadows of her own capabilities loomed large, urging her to confront her fears and embrace the unknown. Could she plunge deeper into this covert investigation without losing herself in the crossfire of deception and danger? When she returned to her quarters that evening, the weight of her decisions pressed heavily upon her. Tomorrow would demand more from her than mere observation. It might require direct confrontation. The idea sent a shiver down her spine, a cauldron of bravery and fear simmering just beneath the surface.
As she lay awake, contemplating her next steps, one question dominated her thoughts. Was she ready to enter a dance with uncertainty, knowing that one misstep could blow her cover, or worse, unravel the fragile safety she'd worked to maintain? The answer would come soon enough, like the breaking dawn that promised both clarity and chaos. As dawn stretched its fingers across the sky, painting it with hues of orange and pink, Sarah's mind drummed with a rhythm of resolve mixed with apprehension. She could sense that today held a turning point, the kind that could either amplify her purpose or unravel it catastrophically. After breakfast, the girls had shuffled off to school, their laughter echoing behind them like a retreating tide, leaving Sarah standing at the threshold of the house. In that pregnant silence, she felt the full scale of her undertaking. Today would not just be about keeping up appearances or gathering intelligence. It would demand an engagement so intimate that it might just unveil deeper truths, or perhaps more terrifying falsehoods. She steeled herself, her nerves tingling with the anticipation of what lay ahead. With a practiced ease, she donned her disguise, a smile that expressed warmth, a posture that screamed confidence, and a heart racing with purpose, but otherwise masked under the guise of nurturing. As she stepped outside, she spotted Edward almost at once. He leaned casually against the car, that same calm exterior intact, but this time there was no way she would allow her instincts to mislead her. Approaching the vehicle, Sarah schooled her expression into friendly neutrality. "Good morning, Edward," she offered, her voice light yet probing. "Morning, Miss Sarah," he replied, eyes unyielding. She noticed how he scanned the surroundings as they spoke, missing nothing, and it excited her as much as it unsettled her. "I was thinking I could use a quick ride to the market. There's something specific I need for the girls." "Sure," Edward replied, seemingly indifferent. Yet Sarah felt a hint of curiosity from him, and that made her pulse quicken. The drive to the market was filled with trivial chatter. She engaged him in friendly conversation, pushing against the silence that felt thick with the weight of unsaid words. It was like walking a tightrope. One misstep could send her tumbling into treachery. After brief exchanges about the weather and the upcoming school events, she decided to test the waters. "You must have seen quite a bit of action with the Harringtons, huh?" she ventured casually, gauging his response. "We have our routines," Edward said, his tone clipped. It was neither inviting nor dismissive, but it laid the groundwork for further inquiry. "That must make things interesting," she pressed, leaning into the familiar warmth she projected. "I'd just do my job, miss, nothing more to it." His eyes remained fixed on the road, dismissing her attempt to get close.
That curt answer shifted something inside her. The first real crack appeared in Edward's polished veneer. Here was someone who knew boundaries, someone who could offer her information but guarded it fiercely. She had steered the conversation into treacherous waters. Now she needed to adjust her sails. "Have you worked for the family long?" she asked, adjusting her strategy, feigning genuine curiosity while crafting layers of depth to her seemingly harmless persona. "Just a few years, but in this line of work, time flies," he replied without looking at her. With that response, Sarah sensed that something deeper lurked beneath his surface, the same illusion she had felt yesterday. It was an inkling of something she could explore, a crack in the stoic facade, but she had to tread carefully. Pressuring him could throw him further behind his defenses. She weighed her options, recognizing the need for tactical finesse rather than overt inquiry. As they arrived at the market, she formulated a plan. Maybe Edward wasn't the fortress she'd initially presumed. Perhaps he was a pawn in a game far larger than either imagined. Armed with this revelation, she felt the surge of new energy, the thrill of confrontation merging with strategy. What if she could coax him into revealing the truth hidden within the crevices of his guardedness? Exiting the vehicle, she turned back to him. "Thank you for the ride, Edward. You've always been so helpful." His expression flickered for a moment, catching the kindness behind her words, but then he was back to being the vigilant driver. This time, her gentility seemed like a veiled blade, ready to sink into the tension brewing between them. With a determined step, she entered the bustling market, her mind buzzing with potential outcomes. Today would mark a definitive shift. She would draw him out or find courage in the disappointment of resistance. The stakes had never felt higher, and with them loomed a question she asked herself. Could this subtle exploration of the apprehension in Edward's demeanor unveil the hidden threats? As her eyes scanned the colorful produce and bright displays of the market, she felt exhilaration and apprehension intertwine. The line between predator and prey was about to blur. Today was only the beginning, and soon she would face the moment that would demand everything from her. Would she find the truth, or merely magnify her own fears? The vibrant market swirled around Sarah, a cacophony of sounds and colors that amplified the tension rippling beneath her calculated exterior. Each stall she passed felt like a portal into a different world, yet her focus remained fixed on the mission at hand. She needed information that had evaded her grasp, and if Edward had even the slightest inkling of the shadows lurking behind his employer's polished life, she had to elicit it. With her shopping list clutched tightly in her hand, Sarah regarded the fruits and vegetables, but her mind shifted to strategy.
Weighting her words carefully, she planned each interaction to coax Edward into a deeper engagement. Her heart hammered as she maneuvered through the maze of shoppers, knowing that every conversation could pivot towards her true goal. To a casual observer, her demeanor remained unflappable. She laughed at a child's glee over a balloon, admired the craftsmanship of hand-woven baskets, but internally she was a tempest. This layered persona she wore was both a shield and a weapon. She had to utilize it wisely, or else risk exposing her vulnerabilities. Movement caught her attention. Just ahead, a man in a dark coat appeared to be watching her intently. The realization sliced through her calm. His eyes shifted between themselves and the market-goers, observant yet ambiguous. Before she could catalog her feelings of unease, she caught Edward's silhouette behind her, settling into his role as her quiet guardian. She took a deep breath, quickly shedding her sense of danger to remain focused. As she approached the fruit vendor, Sarah spotted an opportunity. "Edward," she called out, her tone drenched with playful charm, "how about some fresh strawberries? The girls will love these." "Sure," he replied, his demeanor still professional, but more relaxed in her presence. This opening allowed her to crack further into the stoic man she had begun to unravel. "They look good," he added, glancing at the bright red berries. "That's what I thought. Not every day we get to indulge in this kind of freshness." "True," he said, adjusting his stance, though his eyes remained vigilant. "Have you ever taken the kids out for something fun after groceries?" she ventured, hoping to shift his focus. "Maybe a picnic?" Edward's gaze flickered momentarily, almost as if she had struck a nerve. "We keep things pretty simple. It's better that way." "Better how?" Sarah pressed, keeping her tone light yet definitive. "I mean, enjoying a little adventure feels like it should be part of the job. Don't your responsibilities fade when you share moments with them?" Behind his steady facade, a slight tension traced the lines of his mouth. She could feel the guard come up again. In the space that held their conversation, Sarah recognized that his reluctance signaled more than mere duty. He was hiding something. "Moments are fleeting," he replied cryptically, a hint of longing in his voice. "That was it. Cut through the surface. Dig deeper. What's fleeting? Fun? Memories? Or a sense of purpose?" she teased, letting her curiosity spill out. "Maybe you could find something beyond the job?" For an instant, he looked at her as if truly seeing her. Then the wall crashing back down. "I'll enjoy the strawberries," he said shortly, turning the conversation back to the mundane. Disappointment gnawed at her, a reminder of the hidden truths lurking just beyond her reach. But reflection ignited a spark of resolve.
Perhaps it wasn't Edward who held the key. Perhaps it was all about how she approached him, the empathy she projected. She had to utilize her nurturing instincts, the very strengths that defined her as a mother. With a new intention, Sarah meandered back toward Edward, her demeanor softer, warmer. "You know," she mused,
Being a caregiver is more than just watching over someone. It's about connecting with them. Aren't we all seeking connection in some way? His eyes watched her carefully, dissecting the sincerity she hoped to convey. She felt an unusual bond forming, a flicker of understanding grappling with their realities. But before the moment could cradle them, the man in the coat edged closer. She noticed his glances dart between her and Edward. Anxiety knotted in her stomach. This wasn't a coincidence. Just as she opened her mouth to ask Edward what he made of this stranger, the man stepped forward, breaking her train of thought with a singular question. "Are you all right, miss?" The shift in the atmosphere was palpable, and Sarah sensed the tension tightening around their little bubble of connection. Suddenly, Edward was on high alert, the gears in his mind shifting as he sized up the newcomer. "Is there something you need?" Edward's voice was steely, a protector readying for confrontation. Their worlds, once neatly defined, began to tremble at the edges, the potential for revelation coiling in the air. And as Sarah stood there, a new dilemma blossomed within her. She could hide from the darkness threatening to breach her facade, or face it head-on and uncover the truths disguised behind the confidence she wore as armor. Would she be ready to confront whatever came next, or would her courage waver under the weight of the unknown? Sarah's heart raced, the stranger's words slicing through the mirage of warmth she had tried to weave between herself and Edward. The air thickened with a tension that seemed to vibrate at a lower frequency, all sense of connection evaporating in the face of uncertainty. The man's eyes bore into her with a weight she hadn't anticipated, and suddenly the strawberries in her hand felt heavy with implications. "Are you all right?" she repeated, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Yes," the man said, glancing at Edward and then back to her. "But it's better to be cautious. There are things happening that you don't see." The cryptic message rolled over Sarah like a shockwave, and she had to cling to her composure. Was he a threat or a misguided protector? Edward moved closer, his posture tense, drawing a line in the sand. She sensed the storm brewing just beneath his skin. "Who are you?" Edward's voice was a low growl, protective instincts kicking into high gear. With the storm looming, Sarah felt an unexpected surge of clarity within the chaos. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the crux of her mission.
She shifted her focus away from the fear clawing at her gut and directed all her energy toward the man in front of her. "Let's not turn this into a confrontation," she suggested, her tone softening. "Maybe you can shed light on what you mean?" The man hesitated, considering her words. "My name is Alex," he said, lowering his gaze slightly, allowing her a moment of earnestness beneath his guarded expression. "I work for Mr. Bennett. I've seen things that you shouldn't ignore." Her internal compass shifted. If Alex worked for the enemy, perhaps he held the key to the information she most needed. "What have you seen?" "Suffice it to say, this isn't just about taking care of high-profile clients. There are deeper entanglements," he remarked, his voice dropping as if he might be overheard. Sarah and Edward exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of their collective unease at the revelation. "Then tell us," she pressed, edging closer, wanting desperately to snatch at this thread of opportunity. "I don't want to get involved," Alex began, and Sarah could see insecurity flickering in his eyes. If she were ever to reach the answers hidden within Edward's world, she would have to coax it from Alex. "You're already involved," she said, her voice firm yet inviting. "You know more than you're letting on. Help us understand what's going on before it's too late, for all of us." A flicker of conflict crossed his features, and in that moment she recognized the internal struggle. "I won't betray my employer. That's not what I'm here for." "Betray?" Edward injected. "It sounds more like saving lives to me. What are you afraid of, Alex?" The man's eyes darkened, and Sarah could see the walls solidifying around him again. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he warned. "Things will spiral out of control if you interfere. My advice is to distance yourself and keep your heads down." But Sarah refused to back down. Here was an opening, a glimmering chance not just to gather information, but to influence a chain of events she never thought possible. "You have a choice," she emphasized, her tone softer now, threading her compassion through urgency. "You can let fear own you, or you can act from a place of courage for those who are affected by all of this. We can help you, but you have to start talking." Silence enveloped them, the soft murmur of the market fading into the background. The weight of their collective fear hung heavy in the air, overshadowing the rich aromas wafting from surrounding stalls. Finally, Alex glanced from her to Edward. "You really don't know," he murmured, his voice quaking slightly. "But I'll tell you this, there's more at stake than you can imagine. A decision to make soon.
It closes in around you, and time is running out. Sarah felt her breath catch, a visceral awareness gripping her heart.
She wanted to push for more, to capture every drop of information that could propel her forward, but instead she could only nod, even apprehensively, acknowledging the gravity of the choice hanging like a Damocles sword. As Alex stepped back, their eyes meeting one last time, she could feel the pulse of change tightening around them. Was her path illuminated, or was she merely stumbling deeper into shadows unimagined? "I'll be watching," he stated, his voice firm as he turned away, leaving behind a maelstrom of possibilities and choices unleashed. Her resolve crystallized. The time for hesitation had passed. The shadows surrounding Edward's life were deep, but she would navigate them fiercely. "What do we do now?" she asked Edward, fully aware that they were standing on the cusp of a precipice. "We prepare for what's coming," he replied, tension crackling in his voice, "and I suggest we uncover the truth behind Alex's warning as soon as possible." Sarah looked into the bustling throngs of people, her identity switching gears from mother to investigator. Trust would be her weapon. Time would test her preparations. What awaited her beyond this moment would either solidify her newfound strength or unravel every thread she had so carefully sewn together. Little did she know, the next encounter would challenge her resolve in ways she had never anticipated. The corridor felt suffocating as Sarah followed Edward back home, the echo of their confrontation with Alex reverberating in her mind. Each step resonated with a weight that was both exhilarating and daunting. In a matter of minutes, she had gone from an overwhelmed mother to a soldier in an unseen war, armed with little more than intuition and the fragments of information Alex had left behind. "Do you think he's telling the truth?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper as they entered their dimly lit apartment. The familiar surroundings felt alien, as though shadows now crept into the corners, lurking where she had once felt safe. "I think he's scared," Edward replied, his brow furrowed with concern. "And scared people don't always make the best choices." A flicker of anger kindled in her chest. She understood fear, how it could paralyze the boldest of souls. Perhaps, she mused, it was that very fear that had kept her passive for so long, instead of taking control of her existence. It was time to snatch back the narrative, to emerge from the background. "We need to find out what he meant by deeper entanglements," she insisted, already pacing the living room, her mind racing through potential options. "I know we can't simply wait." Edward crossed his arms, the tension in his body a defensive barrier. "And what do you propose? You don't have the resources to dig into whatever abyss Alex hinted at." That stung, not because he was wrong, he was painfully accurate, but because it forced her to confront the limit she had grappled with for years.
It ignited a dangerous flicker of motivation within her. What if I did? What if there is something more I can tap into? Sarah. She reclaimed the focus. If harnessing courage was key to navigating this storm, she had to prove to herself she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. "Let me go out tomorrow," she said with sudden resolve. "I can do some research on Mr. Bennett, on everything related to him. I'll find a way." Edward hesitated. "But you'd be risking finding the truth," she interjected, slicing through his caution. With each word falling from her lips, a vision crystallized in her mind. Doing this on her own, using her skills, and discovering a hidden resilience she never knew she possessed. The urgency steeped in their circumstances demanded radical action. The next morning, with new determination fueling her spirit, Sarah made her way to the local library, a place filled with quiet worlds whispering their secrets. She combed through public records, reports on Bennett Enterprises, and news articles, piecing together a narrative of ambition and perhaps darker motives. The more she learned, the more the pieces of Alex's warning began to fit a larger and more complicated puzzle, one that entwined her and Edward deeper than she realized. As hours turned into a blur of manic scribbling and fervent brows, a subtle breakthrough surfaced. A recent project that Bennett had undertaken, connecting with powerful figures whose influence spread like spider silk through the city's underbelly. And at the heart of it all was a certain mystery, the untimely disappearance of several employees who had crossed paths with him. Just as she uncovered a name that sent chills down her spine, a realization seized her. This was more than just business. Lives were at stake, including their own. An involuntary tremor coursed through her. Suddenly, she wasn't just seeking the truth. She was facing betrayal, deceit, and possibly worse. "Sarah," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Edward, concern etched across his features. "Are you all right? You've gone pale." Her throat tightened, emotions swirling in a chaotic spiral. "I think I found something big," she murmured, but the implications seemed weighty enough to crush her. As she lifted her gaze to meet his, one thought surged forward. What if this was just the beginning?
What if uncovering the truth meant confronting a foe she was ill-equipped to handle? In that moment, standing at the precipice of revelation, she knew the stakes had escalated dramatically. And as uncertainty gnawed at the edges of her determination, the revelation of what lay ahead loomed ominously. Wherever their path might lead, they could very well be on the brink of irrevocable change. What awaited her in the shadows of this escalating conflict was a question that would challenge her on every level she could imagine. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the implications of her discovery.
The name she had unearthed, Travis Sloan, loomed in her thoughts, a thread that could unravel everything they thought they understood about Bennett Enterprises. The fact that Sloan had been mentioned in conjunction with the strange disappearances felt particularly relevant, instilling a newfound urgency in her demeanor. "What do we do now?" Edward prompted, his voice pulling her from her reverie. His anxious gaze followed her as she shifted restlessly, energy crackling around her like static. "We need to find out who Sloan is," she replied, an urgency dripping from each word. "If he has any connection to these disappearances, then we need to know." "Okay, but how do we approach this without exposing ourselves?" He leaned against the library's wooden shelves, eyeing the surrounding patrons who were blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. The question lingered in the air, a chain binding her thoughts momentarily. If she was about to plunge deeper into this quagmire, she needed a plan built on subterfuge and tact. "We could start by looking into his professional dealings. Maybe he has some public records that could give us insight into who he associates with." As they scoured the digital databases available at the library, she could feel her focus sharpening. It was as if a veil had lifted, allowing her to see the world with new clarity. Each click of the keyboard produced a surge of adrenaline, mapping her newfound quest like a battlefield strewn with information instead of weapons. Suddenly, Sarah stumbled upon a thread online, a discussion forum buzzing with rumors about Sloan's alleged ties to organized crime, a web extending into nefarious ambitions that stretched far beyond corporate greed. Her heart raced. This was the deeper entanglement Alex feared. There was no denying the seeds of a dangerous conspiracy had been planted around her and Edward. But the risk attached to uncovering such truths was palpable. What if this man, this titan of the business world, had been waiting for someone like her to come sniffing around? The web of power surrounding people like Sloan was insidious, and now her family's safety felt as fleeting as a breath of dust from an old book. "Sarah," Edward's voice interrupted again, laced with worry. Pushing deeper could draw unwanted attention. "We're not equipped for that level of confrontation." "I know," she muttered, her fingers pausing momentarily above the keyboard. "But let's consider this. We're at a tipping point. We can either let fear keep us frozen, or we can fight back with the knowledge we've gathered." His eyes locked onto hers, a struggle etched across his face. "But what if fighting back puts you in danger? You have to think of Lizzie. What if I don't?" she retorted, the weight of their reality crashing down around her. "I'm not going to sit back while our lives are threatened. I have to do this." A battle of emotions played out on Edward's face, but deep down, he knew she was right.
Complacency could no longer be an option. With a heavy sigh, he nodded, perhaps conceding to the inevitable choice they'd both had to grapple with. "Then we need to proceed with caution. We should keep our findings to ourselves for now. Let's form a plan on how to approach him indirectly." "Agreed," Sarah said, a flicker of triumph igniting hope within her chest. The next phase of their operation began to materialize before her eyes, and she felt a sense of empowerment begin to blossom. With every decision made, she sensed her own strength growing, the latent capacity to navigate this treacherous terrain where fear loomed large. As they finalized their plan, her awareness of the true battle ahead started to crystallize. This wouldn't just be about exposing corruption, it would be about standing up against the shadows that threatened to overwhelm them. Her resolve solidified, Sarah realized they were embarking on a path laden with unforeseen consequences. How powerful a foe could Sloan truly be? And as they left the library, a sense coursed through her veins, an awareness that the war was only just beginning. Each next step a measured maneuver on a treacherous chessboard. The battle for their lives had only just begun, and she was determined to take control. Striding into the uncertain future, she felt a burning question ignite within her. What revelations awaited them in this perilous dance, and who would emerge unscathed? The sun set low on the horizon as Sarah entered her small apartment, the shadows creeping in as if to remind her of the looming darkness surrounding Bennett Enterprises. Every fragment of information gathered today flickered through her mind, illuminating pathways she hadn't dared to explore before. She was no longer just a maid. She had become an investigator, armed with purpose and an urgency that propelled her forward. That evening, as she sat opposite Edward, they mapped their next moves on a whiteboard cluttered with notes and questions. "We need to figure out a way to gather more intel on Travis Sloan without raising any alarms," she said,
her voice steady and resolute. Edward nodded, an air of respect forming around her unearthed tenacity. "You've really transformed into a proactive force," he admitted, and a wave of pride washed over her. It was a compliment that validated her journey, marking a clear departure from the insecure maid who had brushed her hands against cold marble. Now she was driven by fierce determination and the hope that each step would bring them closer to the truth. The following days blurred into a whirlwind of planning and subtle observation. Sarah would accompany Edward during errands while also keeping her eyes peeled for Sloane's activities. They devised a strategy, engaging with people who might have insight into Sloane's dealings, former employees, vendors, anyone who might have been swept away by his ruthless ambition.
One afternoon, during a visit to a local basic supply store, Sarah struck up a conversation with the shop owner, an elderly man with a wealth of local knowledge. "You're associated with the Harringtons, right?" he asked casually as he rang up her purchases. "Yes, but I'm mostly just getting supplies for the kids," she replied, feigning innocence while weighing her words carefully. "I've heard whispers about Mr. Sloane. Any good stories?" At that, the old man's face transformed, revealing a glimmer of suppressed ire. "He's a shark, that one. People have gone missing after getting too close to him. Remember, kid, safety first." His warning rang in her ears as she thanked him and gathered her things, adrenaline surging through her as she turned to leave. Now she had a tangible lead. It was evident that Sloane operated in a dangerous realm, and that danger was creeping closer to her and Edward day by day. With each interaction, Sarah's confidence solidified. She learned how to read people, deciphering the unspoken cues that formerly eluded her in the Harrington household. Each conversation chipped away at her anxiety and reinforced her resolve. One evening, as they returned from another long day of inquiries, Sarah felt a weight lift. A clarity emerged, a sense of purpose she had long yearned for. "I think we should approach someone connected to Sloane directly, perhaps someone who has recently left his employ," she suggested. Edward regarded her thoughtfully. "You're coming into your own, but this is dangerous territory, Sarah. Are you ready for that?" "More than ever," she affirmed, her voice steady. "Hiding will only prolong our suffering. We need to confront this directly to protect our families." The following day, with a clear plan in place, they set out to locate a recently dismissed employee of Bennett Enterprises, a woman named Mia who had a reputation for being vocal about Sloane's darker dealings. Finding Mia proved challenging, but intuition guided them to a local coffee shop where she often visited. They arrived, scanning the room until they spotted her hunched over in a corner, a shell of her former self, eyes heavy with fear. Sarah approached her, laying all pretenses aside. "Mia, I know you've been through a lot. We need your help, and I promise we're not here to put you in danger. We need to understand what's happening at Bennett Enterprises." Mia looked up, wariness flooding her features. "It's not safe for me to talk," she whispered. "Sloane has ears everywhere. But we need to protect the Harringtons, the children. You share their fate as much as we do if he continues unchecked," Edward emphasized, gripping her hand reassuringly. Mia hesitated, but saw in their eyes a shared determination that couldn't be ignored. "Okay, but we have to do this somewhere safe." The three of them settled into a quiet corner, and as Mia began to share her experiences, the pieces fell into place. She divulged the fear tactics used by Sloane, the skeletons hidden beneath the glossy surface of his empire, and just how deep his corruption ran. Sarah felt the gravity of Mia's revelations settle heavily around them each time a new name crossed her lips. The connections to human trafficking operations and large-scale cover-ups revealed not just ambitious greed, but a callous disregard for the lives shattered in Sloane's ascent. Once the weight of the information sank in, Sarah and Edward exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that propelled them into action. They realized that unveiling this truth wouldn't just protect the Harringtons, it could potentially unravel Sloane's empire altogether. That was the moment Sarah understood her evolution wasn't just newfound resolution. It was stepping into her power, becoming an agent of change rather than a silent follower. She would contend against the storm, not just for herself, but for those unrightfully thrust into shadowy circumstances. "Let's gather evidence, any documentation you have, Mia," she said with clarity. "We will expose this together." By the end of their encounter, Sarah felt a sense of fulfillment settle within her. She had transmuted fear into action. She had become a force for truth, something she once feared she would never achieve. As they left the coffee shop, Edward turned to her, awe bright in his eyes. "You've come such a long way, Sarah. I can see the change in you." A smile broke across her face.
This isn't just about me, Edward. It's about protecting our families and everyone who's been affected like us. For every challenge that lay ahead, Sarah was more determined than ever. Clarity filled her heart as they set their sights on exposing Sloane, knowing that together they could unravel the threads of deceit binding their fates. Now came the moment of action, one where Sarah would cement her growth from invisibility to undeniable presence. The choices they made, starting now, would go through every corner of their lives in the days to come. As they drove away, a profound question loomed in their minds. Would they find safety through the light of truth, or would the looming shadows consume them in the chase for justice? Sarah leaned back, resolute. It was time to confront the dark, and she was ready. The world she had once been afraid to face was hers to reclaim, and she knew with absolute certainty nothing could extinguish the spark of purpose ignited within her. And so began their next chapter, one defined by the choices they made in the intersection of fear and courage, truth and deceit, all swirling in a quest for justice. Would they emerge unscathed? Only time would tell. As Sarah stared out the window, she felt the exhilarating promise of the unknown ahead. An intricate dance awaited, and she was prepared to step into the light. Now, as the narrative drew to a close, the audience awaits the next unfolding of this emotional saga.
Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. The struggle against darkness is always more powerful with allies. Don't wait even one more second to share.